Some folks buy a vacation home to escape their troubles. Me, I bought mine at Pine Ridge Lake in 1989, thinking I'd found paradise. 30 years later, that little slice of heaven became ground zero in a war with an HOA that thought they could push me out. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Have you ever had an HOA try to force you out of your home? Drop your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you handled it. My cabin isn't much to look at from the outside. Just a simple A-frame my wife and I bought with our savings after the kids left for college. But it sits on the best piece of property on the entire lake. A gentle slope leading down to a private dock with old-growth pines providing just enough shade without blocking the morning sun. Mary and I spent 20 summers there before she passed, and every board, every nail holds a memory. The Pine Ridge Lake Homeowners Association had always been just fine, mostly invisible, collecting reasonable dues for road maintenance and the occasional dock repair. That all changed when Bill Henderson moved into the community and got himself elected HOA president in 2002. Suddenly, the HOA meetings that used to last 30 minutes now stretched for hours, with Bill proposing all sorts of improvements that would cost us all thousands. The first notice I got was about my dock. "Frank, your dock doesn't meet the new community standards," Bill said, handing me a violation notice during my morning coffee on the porch. "The board has voted that all docks must be uniform in appearance and construction." I looked out at my dock, solid, well-maintained, the same one I'd built with my own hands back in '90. "Bill, I've had this dock for 12 years. It's perfectly safe. What's the problem?" "The problem is consistency, Frank. We're trying to maintain property values here." He adjusted his polo shirt, already looking uncomfortable in the morning heat. "You have 30 days to bring it into compliance or face fines." The compliance would have cost me nearly $8,000, essentially tearing down my perfectly good dock and rebuilding it to match the newer, fancier ones Bill and his friends preferred. I paid the fine instead. $100 a month was cheaper than replacing something that didn't need replacing, but that was just the beginning. Next came the paint violation. My cabin had been the same shade of forest green since 1992, but apparently it was now too dark and depressing, according to the new color palette the board had approved. Then it was my shed, too rustic. My flagstone path, not uniform. Enough! My mailbox doesn't match the community aesthetic. Each violation came with escalating fines, and each time I refused to comply, the fines grew larger. By the 6th month, I owed over $3,000 in penalties. I wasn't the only one either. Bill and his cronies on the board were targeting anyone who wouldn't go along with their vision for the community, mostly us old-timers who'd been there since the beginning. You wouldn't believe what they did next. At the July meeting, Bill stood up and announced that the board had voted to amend the bylaws, adding a clause that any property with accumulated fines over $2,500 would be subject to a lien and possible forced sale. A murmur went through the room. I raised my hand. "Bill, when exactly was this vote taken? I don't recall receiving notice of any bylaw change." He smiled, that tight, superior smile of his. "It was at a special meeting last month, Frank. Notices were sent to all members. I hadn't received any notice. Neither had half the people I talked to afterward. The fines kept coming. The violations became increasingly absurd. My bird feeder was attracting undesirable wildlife. My porch swing was an unapproved structure. Even the antique wind chime Mary had given me for our anniversary was cited as creating excessive noise. By October, I had received a certified letter informing me that the HOA had placed a lien on my property and was initiating proceedings to force a sale unless I paid nearly $7,000 in fines and brought my property into full compliance with their new standards. That's when I knew this wasn't really about docks and paint colors. Bill wanted my property. Several of his developer friends had been sniffing around the lake, and my lot, with its perfect slope and mature trees, was ideal for one of those monstrosities they were building. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at that letter, feeling a mixture of anger and helplessness. This cabin was all I had left of Mary, of the life we'd built together. I couldn't lose it. Then I remembered something my old law partner used to say. The devil's in the details, Frank. Always check the details. I drove into town the next day and went to the county records office. I asked to see the original covenants and bylaws for Pine Ridge Lake, along with every amendment since the community was founded. The clerk looked at me skeptically. That's going to take some time, mister. We're talking 30 years of documents. I've got time, I said, settling into a chair with my thermos of coffee. 5 hours later, I'd found it. Tucked away in the original community charter from 1988 was a clause that required any bylaw amendment to be approved not just by the board, but by a majority vote of the entire membership. I also discovered something interesting about the HOA's finances. Bill and his board had been using association funds to pay for improvements that directly benefited their own properties, things like private security patrols that seemed to focus only on their streets, and landscaping services that somehow never made it to my side of the lake. Armed with this information, I requested copies of the meeting minutes for the past 2 years. The HOA secretary, a nice woman named Carol, who'd always been friendly to me, hesitated, but eventually provided. Then that's when I found the smoking gun. The minutes showed that the vote to amend the bylaws regarding liens and forced sales had taken place at a meeting with only 4 board members present, no quorum, and certainly no majority vote of the membership. He documented everything. I took photos of the minutes, made copies of the original charter, and even managed to get a statement from Carol confirming that proper notice hadn't been sent for the special meeting. Then I started talking to neighbors. At first, some were hesitant to get involved. Bill could be intimidating, and many worried about their own properties. But when I showed them the evidence, the financial irregularities, the violated procedures, the pattern of targeting certain homeowners, more began to join me. We formed a group called Pine Ridge Homeowners for Fair Governance. We printed flyers, held meetings, and gathered signatures on a petition calling for a special election to remove the current board. The response from Bill and his cronies was swift and nasty. They sent out a newsletter accusing me of spreading misinformation and attempting to destabilize the community for personal gain. They even tried to fine me for holding unauthorized meetings in my own home. If this HOA sounds unbelievable already, make sure to hit subscribe. You don't want to miss how this ends. Things came to a head at the November HOA meeting. The room was packed, standing room only. Bill and his board sat at the front looking smug. When the floor opened for comments, I was first to speak. I laid out everything, the violations of the original charter, the financial mismanagement, the failure to follow proper procedures for bylaw changes. Bill interrupted me. These are baseless accusations, Frank. You're just trying to avoid paying. The fines you've rightfully incurred. I held up a copy of the original charter, then explained this bill, Section 7, Paragraph 3. Any amendment to these bylaws must be approved by a majority vote of the entire membership of the association. When exactly did that vote happen for the Lien amendment? His face went pale. That's an outdated provision. It was superseded. By what? Another amendment that also wasn't properly voted on? I looked around the room. How many of you received notice and a ballot for the bylaw change allowing liens and forced sales? Not a single hand went up, I continued. And how many of you have noticed that the community improvements seem to stop at the end of Bill's street? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Then Carol, the HOA secretary, stood up. I need to say something. Bill told me not to send out the notices for the special meeting. He said it was more efficient to just have the board vote. The room erupted. Bill was shouting, trying to regain control, but it was too late. The dam had broken. One after another, homeowners stood up to share their own experiences with Bill's regime. Fines for trivial violations, projects that benefited. Only a few bullying tactics. By the end of the meeting, we had enough signatures to call for a special election. Under the original charter, we needed signatures from just 25% of the homeowners. We had over 60%. The election was held the first week of December. Bill and his board members were soundly defeated, replaced by a mix of old-timers and newer residents, who wanted fairness and transparency. The new board's first act, to rescind all the improper fines and violations issued under Bill's leadership. They also commissioned an audit of the HOA finances, which revealed that Bill and his friends had misused over $40,000 in association funds. Bill was forced to repay the money and step down from the community in disgrace. Last I heard, he'd moved to Florida, probably looking for another HOA to terrorize. As for me, I still have my cabin just the way Mary and I always kept it. The dock is still the one I built with my own hands. The paint is still forest green, and Mary's wind chime still sings in the breeze. The new board even created a historic properties designation for cabins like mine that have been in the community since the beginning, protecting them from frivolous violations. Looking back, I realized this was never really about docks or paint colors or even money. It was about power, people getting a little taste of it and letting it go to their heads. It was about a community remembering what it was supposed to be. Neighbors looking out for each other, not bureaucrats looking to control each other. Sit on my porch now, watching the sun set over the lake, and I think about how close I came to losing this place. But standing up for what's right, sometimes that's the most important home improvement you can make. What's the most ridiculous HOA demand you've ever encountered? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about standing up to the little tyrants who think they can push us around.